I'm speaking to Reverend Leslie Malachi Wilson. She is the director of the African American Ministers Affairs. Her title is so extensive and so broad. She's one of the most prolific leaders in the field of social justice, civil engagement, and public policy. Her reputation is well known around the nation. As a matter of fact, she heads up two more specific components of People for the American Way. One is vessels. I am a vessel, and I'm ready now in this season to vote. In addition to that, there is a woman's component, very powerful and very effective, by the name Vashti. So I'm delighted to have this privilege and opportunity to speak to her regarding the United States of America. United, that is all for one and one for all, at least um, intended. That is the dream of America. But it is not, it's almost a nightmare at present. Our election will be coming up in just a few short days, November the 3rd to be exact. And right now, all across the nation, the Ministry of African American Ministers Affairs is at work in at least 28 states. And these brothers and sisters are very effective, efficient, and powerful. Reverend Wilson, I'd like to ask you concerning your role in leading such an organization as this that's known around the world, and I dare say around the world in certain parts and certain countries.
Well, good evening, Dr. Shine, and thank you for having me. I serve as the National Director of African American Religious Affairs at People for the American Way. And I have been in this position for 11 years now. One of the things that I'm very excited about is the opportunity to work with women and men of faith who do not count it as robbery to step up and to step from behind the pulpit and to be out into the streets, in the neighborhoods, be wherever God tells them to that they need to be in order to be speaking within the context of the social gospel of Jesus Christ about social justice. And so it is an honor for me to serve a ministerial alliance of almost 3,000 clergy. It is an ecumenical body, but most importantly, it is a body that believes that we must be engaged from the pulpit in social justice through civic engagement.
Thank you for that, Reverend Wilson. Um, if I may, I'd like to begin with a current crisis, I will call it, and that is the United States Supreme Court. And I know that uh, in this organization of which you're the national leader, there has been a great deal of interest in who should be nominated and then selected for a seat. And so I want to go this way. Um, there's been talk about should the Democrats Party win the election, quote unquote, they will pack the court. Is the word pack the court a negative, or equalizing the court positive?
Well, the concept is not a new one. The concept um, of how many people should actually be on our U.S. Supreme Court is very specifically what we're talking about now. It's the U.S. Supreme Court. It has been around since the 1850s. The whole idea of depending upon which political party is in the majority, making sure that they have basically a court that would rubber stamp some of the legislation, some of the cases that would come before them. Um, I don't know. Whether you use the word of packing the courts or use the words equalizing. It's basically the same kind of concept. I'm not totally sure that the way in which things work, that especially with the current court, if we look at the ages of those that have been on the court, seated on the court for a while, I'm not sure of what that's going to mean in terms of a long-term strategy. When you end up having some people who will retire, some who may die while they're still serving, as Justice Ginsburg did. I'm not sure if it's going to make a difference of whether or not they expand the court to have 10 or to have 15 at the end of the day, because the idea is what we want on the courts are fair-minded constitutionalists, not people who are wedded to a political party, but who have an understanding of what is needed to what they need to be doing to render decisions that have impacts on our daily lives. So whether it stays at 9 or is expanded, again, it's the who is going to be in office, who's going to be nominating these people, and how long will they. At any time, the decision to expand the court can be done. But one of the things that we do know right now is that there is some legislation that is moving around Congress that would codify 9 justices, basically saying that there could not be more than 9 justices on the courts. That is moving around. I'm not sure of how much air that has, but the idea of how many people sit on the court is not so much the issue as the type of mindset that he or she has or they have when they come on, when they are nominated and when they are confirmed to be seated.
Thank you for that. And that was a brilliant explanation. Let me go further. Um, I was brought up in a traditional African American family. We were always a Baptist family. Being born and bred as a Baptist, it's in the blood. And so whether you're born and raised as a Catholic, it's in the blood. It's part of your DNA. It's part of your mindset. It's part
Mm-hmm.
of so to say that faith and religion should not subject to be brought up, but if that's who you are, and so when I go out to lunch, for an example, for dinner, and I'm in a public place, I have no realm or no problem of first bowing my head and asking the Lord thanks over the food I'm about to receive,
Yes.
because of who I am. And I'm certain that that's part of anyone who practices a particular religion, that that's who they are. And that religion does, in fact, impact on your daily life, whether it's overt or covert. Your decisions about how you live will impact and influence decisions you make. And consequence for them to um, say that religion doesn't matter in these consequential issues, I take issue with that because of who you are.
I agree. It's a very hard. It's hard to walk that walk um, than to talk that talk, because your faith is a core value, and as a core value, it helps to inform the decisions that you make. It helps to inform whether you go left or whether you go right, and so the way in which it gets played out that someone is supposed to, when they are seated in a certain position, whether elected or appointed, that they are not supposed to give consideration to their faith is a hard one for me to walk with. But I do understand and appreciate those that struggle with religious freedom and with religious liberty, and try to keep the separation of church and state in place. But it's a hard walk for me to separate myself from my faith because, as you said, I too am a Baptist, but I'm a Christian, and everywhere I go, I'm going to walk in that light and want to be seen in that light and want it to be understood that my faith in my Christianity, I am Christian because of my belief systems, and my belief systems, again, my core values are embedded in that faith tradition. So that's a hard one for people to separate themselves. That's the way in which I feel about it.
Well, thank you for it. Now, I want to raise three other issues, um, and one is the ACA, better known as the Obamacare. The second is the LGBTQ issue, and the third is this matter of gun control. These are issues that are relevant, and these issues, there is the white supremacists, and there is the um, Aquanon, and there is the those gun toting militants. And these are issues that we are being confronted with, and some are saying via the radio, via the um, Facebook, that they're going to disrupt the voting on Wednesday. Some have already taken place with what has taken place with Mr. DeJoy when he came on. And so, would you mind addressing these issues as well?
Well, definitely, the Affordable Care Act is the health care of the country, and we need to be doing everything that we can to make sure that it stands strong. It has been weakened through court decisions and through legislation, but it is still in effect. There is still the Affordable Care Act. That is still the one of the public health insurance mediums that's available. Protecting it means that we are protecting, by protecting it, it means that we are protecting millions of Americans who are a part of that vehicle, if you will. That's where they get their insurance from. And so any attacks on it should be fought back, whether no matter where the attacks come from, whether they're legislative or whether they're judicial, we need to continue to be fighting to protect. To protect is the word, to protect the ACA. We also fight to protect marginalized groups such as the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer community, the LGBTQ community, because any group that's under attack puts the rest of us, makes the rest of us vulnerable to attack. We know how fragile our alliances can be. So it is important that we stand together at all times to show that we're not going to allow any one group to be what's the word I'm looking for? Not just discriminated against, but to be exploited. And oppressed, whereas the rest of us just stand on the sidelines and watch that happen. That is not the order of the day. And that is not, when those of us who talk about justice, who walk in justice, that is not a justice methodology. It's to set by and allow somebody else to be oppressed and not do anything about it.
Exactly.
Um, as it relates to gun control, that again is, you know, that the Second Amendment, that's one of the uh, flags of that determines whether or not you, so according to some, whether or not you are a conservative or whether you are a liberal. If you stand for gun control, then that means that you can't be patriotic. If you stand for responsible gun ownership, then that means that you are not patriotic, and that's problematic in that way, because you can't you I don't understand why it has to be an either or and not a both and, because what we're looking at and talking about is the safety of our communities, the safety of our neighborhoods, the safety of our homes. And because that's the only reason why it's an issue is when it comes to protecting your castle, if you will. But the ACA, the the protection of ACA, the protection of LGBTQ rights, and gun control are all, as well as abortion, are all of the issues right now um, that are being used to to fan the flame, if you will, for um, all kinds of discourse that is counterproductive to a democracy, to a democratic society, and counterproductive to the kind of way of life that I believe that we should be living in this country today.
Thank you for that response. Um, if I may digress, but not digress, and pick out just a singular word that you mentioned, and that is the word liberal. To be liberal is to be thought to be um, so far to the left. And they, it's a kind of brand. But as I examine the word liberal, if you don't mind my saying so, then have you to respond. The word liberal comes from a Latin word which is libre, and libre means freedom or liberty
Mhm.
or liberal. And so, as a result of that, then to be called a liberal is to be free. And as a
Mhm.
student of the Bible, as a professor in our Bible Institute here in Philadelphia, when I read uh, the words of our Lord, and he says, whom the Son shall set free is free indeed. That's liberality. That's what we would call libre, liberal. If, if I read in another book, Galatians chapter 6, and it says, um, we are set free in the liberty of our faith, freedom. And so to be liberal is to be free. And so in all the issues that you just responded to, whether it's the ACA, we should be free to have that protection. If it's the LGBTQ community, we should be free. If it's the Second Amendment right, all of us. I do recall in my younger days that the Black Panthers were arrested by a former president for carrying guns, but they were free to do so because look what they're doing today. The young boy, 15 years old, carrying a gun in front of the police and they waving at him, want to take him out to get a hamburger, but don't arrest him. So there is the issue that now comes up, and that is the issue of police and the African American Black community. If you care to respond to that comment.
Well, one of the things that has been amazing to me is the way in which we've allowed right wing conservatives to name us and to take away the correct way in which we perceive who we are. And so the conservatives are the ones that have made liberal a bad word, have made it like it's a nasty taste. They are the ones who have taken the words liberation away from the word liberal and liberty. They're the ones that have been allowed to define who we are. But I can say without any hesitation that I absolutely agree with your definition of a liberal. And it's unfortunate that we don't have more volume to give to that so that others will start embracing it for what it truly is, as opposed to, again, as opposed to being on the defense, because conservatives have said that this is where you're anti this, you're anti that, you're anti, as opposed to being on the defense. We should be more on the offense and defining very clearly and stating very clearly who we are, and that we're not ashamed to be called liberal. We're not ashamed to be about the liberation, about liberty, about freedom for others, again, against oppression. So it's too bad again that you weren't out there to make sure that people stuck with the script so that they would be not defending, but making sure that they are clarifying who they are. That's what needs to happen, is a clarification at this time of who it is. But we have allowed we have allowed the conservatives to take the we usually use the term right wing conservatives, and I always used to fight, and I don't fight as much as I used to fight. Well, why should they have to be right? And if they're right, then that means that we're wrong. Um, and so they're not really the right wing. They're on the wrong side of justice on many issues. But one of the things that we've allowed them to do as well is to determine how they call themselves now social conservatives. They're more concerned about some of the social issues that are happening, and the relationship between communities and law enforcement is one of the areas that you bring up. That is something that they have defined as being a one that's filled with tension to the point of being an absolute us against them. That there's no, they don't, when they frame it or show it, they don't show where there's actually some collaborations that are taking place between community and law enforcement. All they show are the negative images, or they exploit the negative images, so that what it is about is them exploiting people's fear mainly. It's a fear tactic, and it's something that has been used for generations, and they are very good at using it. But the wrong side, the wrong wing on this, of the police, the relationship with the police and community. While we know that there is definitely some justifiable concerns that for marching, for protesting, for asking for police reform and change,
Yes.
nobody can dispute that. Anybody with common sense should not be disputing that. But we also know that we should not be allowing these negative images to define what the movement is, what the Black Lives Matter movement is, what the movement for police reform is, what the movement for justice and equality is. We should not allow those negative images. Those are things that we need to be constantly, again, is being in defense of. It's like, First Peter 3:15, I believe it says, always be prepared to give a defense for the hope that is in you, and to do it quietly, to do it nicely, so that we don't, and that's what we need to be doing more of. Let them continue to do the shouting and being on the extreme of everything, but let us step up to the plate and say, this is not who we are. This is not who we are all about. You can't define our movement. You can't define our time in history. That's where we are right now in terms of the other side, the wrong wing, I call them, trying to take a hold of. We allow them to get away with defining what a liberal is. We will not allow them and cannot allow them to define, again, what the movement is of today, that is advancing civil rights, that is advancing human rights, that's advancing social justice, and equality and equity for all people.
Well, thank you again, which of course, uh, I'm in total cooperation with those responses that you're giving. Here are three additional questions that I would like to raise with you. One is a phrase that all of America, all of the world have heard: "Stand by, stand back." Now, that if you would care to give your definition of what was explicitly meant by that term as we see the results. The next thing that I want to pose, of course, is the pandemic virus, coronavirus, and COVID-19, and as well as the education of our children and the mask issue. Um, and the spread of it's spreading and it's getting worse. Would you care to comment on these three issues that confront us today? Oh, by the way, let me ask you this. It dawned on me something else you said a moment ago, and that is, how do we view the Supreme Court? An activist court, or strictly conservative to the right. Conservative means to African Americans, in my opinion, were conservative. And you know what we used to call them? Let me tell you what a conservative in the black community is called: a pack rat.
A pack rat.
Yes, that is, we hoard everything. We conserve. We keep it in our home. We remember the war days.
Yes,
We had to store everything. So conservatism means to me conserving um, all of what we have because we don't know if hard times are coming. It's the same expression as um, keeping a penny for a rainy day. That's conservatism. So aren't we conservative as well?
yes, we can be. Um, Stand by, stand back. I heard it the way that everybody else in America heard it. No one needs to try to dispute that was not a call to arms. That was not a statement from a white supremacist to the white supremacy community for them to be ready for whatever needs to take place. That was a call for unlawfulness. For lawlessness, basically. But that's what that was. That's what I heard, and that's what I believe that it is. On the COVID-19, I'm someone who follows the science. My personal life is dictated by what the scientists are saying, what the medical community is saying about how to take care of ourselves. The three W's: the wash your hands frequently, the wear a mask, and to watch the distance that you have between persons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that COVID-19 has definitely been, it has been, and not just because of the way in which it has affected us personally, but economically, it has been just so I'm not sure of what the word I want to use for it. I'm in awe of the pandemic itself because of the various levels it has been able to penetrate in, and we're seeing things every time you turn around. There's a new level. There's a new level that it's affecting. So it's affecting us politically. It's affecting us socially. It's affecting us economically. It's affecting us in terms of the way in which we view science. And so the pandemic it has its own. It's almost like I consider it almost like a person these days that is just running rapid, and nobody knows any kind of way to control it. And quite frankly, it will not be controlled. But I do appreciate the education that's being done with the children, with that next generation, of having them to understand how to self-care. And in self-care, they're also caring for their neighbors, they're caring for their community. So I have no problems with children being taught how to wear a mask and how to interact with each other from a distance. And because I'm not in these arenas, in the education arena, I don't know all of the nuances that it takes to come up with what it means to have a plan for safety for the children and for the staff, for the teachers and for the custodians and everyone that works within an education system. So I have to trust the people that have been doing this work have been doing it. They are in new territory, but in some ways they're going to be using some new ideas that are going to come into place, but they're going to mix them with some of the old traditional things, that lessons that we've learned from in the past. Because we know what it meant we knew when the flu as outbreak takes place. We know what happens when there was the measles, when there was the mumps. There's always been something that has caused the education system to have to set back and to look at how do they do things differently to protect the children. So I'm going to trust those that are in the education system right now, and to pray for them as they wrestle with what needs to be done. But definitely continuing to have our children to be aware, to have the knowledge that there is this pandemic that's called COVID and that it does have an impact on their daily life. I totally support that. And to your last point about what is the Supreme Court, is it viewed as an activist court right now? the last justice that just came on, Amy Barnett, considers herself to be an originalist, as someone who looks at the actual language of the Constitution and tries to interpret what was the intent, the actual intent of the writers of the Constitution. Um, I think that we're moving more toward that, which is problematic in that
Man,
where we are today is not where they were yesterday. The world that we live in today is not the world that they even envisioned back then. There's no way that they envisioned the kind of diversity, the kind of beautiful life that we have with so many different people being in this country, coming from other places, bringing their time, their talent, and their resources here to this country. I don't believe that you can go back to the intent of a narrow-minded group of people and apply their thinking to what the world looks like today in the 21st century, and how we have evolved as a country um, of diverse people who are coming from different parts of the world, people who are lending their science, their technology to us, who are bringing things. Not everybody who comes here has something that they bring, and not everything that's bought here is negative. And that's something that we have allowed the wrong side to do very much, is to focus mainly on the negative and not to focus on the positives of immigration. And so, of immigrations of immigrants. And so, I think that we're leaning more toward, with the court being conservative, with us having a 6-3, um, six conservative and 3 liberal justices on the court. I think right now where it's leaning is more to the originalists, more toward the original intent, looking at the intent of the framers of the Constitution, and strongly believe that that is problematic, again, because of the kind of world that we live in today, which at no point we have no idea 50 years from now what the world is going to look like, let alone could they have imagined hundreds of years later what the United States is going to be look like. We are more of a global society than they could have even have imagined. So that's my take on where we are with the courts right now.
well, thank you again, once again. This is very informative, very educational for those who will be viewing and those who will be listening. But you raised some interesting points of observation, and let me continue along that vein. And that is that number one, uh, there are some, and I'm one to be included in that, because we are being told through the media that more African Americans are being affected and dying from the COVID-19. That being so, when the president first learned of this, um, and then not doing anything about it, and now to more than nearly just short of 300,000 people have died, and a million or more are stricken. And then what comes to my mind as an African American of some years behind me, then I'm thinking of ethnic cleansing. Um, and that's the reason that he's allowing us to go. And in some other instances, that is what's coming to my mind. Um, Next, behind that, is this matter of what are your thoughts concerning the court picking up those issues, civil rights, and wanting to abandon and maybe even strip them even more? And here's the word you use, and that is originalist. Now, and I will raise the question, as a student of history to some extent, the originalists. Did the originals have African Americans who were slaves in mind? So when they wrote, "We the people," then the question is, who was the we? The people. And so that when you say you're going to return to as an originalist, and the court will turn in that direction, then it brings to my mind exactly what I just said a moment ago, that there's such a thing, not only originalists, but there's such a thing as white privilege, and there's such a thing as ethnic cleansing. So when you look at these terms and talk about originalists, did the original framers have the slaves in mind when they wrote the Constitution and the Declaration and the Bill of Rights?
I believe that the originalists did have slaves in mind when they wrote those documents, but it was not in the way that would give dignity to slaves as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
That's the component that was missing. They had them in mind, but looking at them more as property as opposed to free-thinking individuals who would be able to take care of their own. I mean, remember the Dred Scott decision that came down that denied citizenship based upon race, and so I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a legal scholar. But I'm an activist, and as an activist, what I see is a court that, again, when the same line of thinking that you have, it's hard for me to believe that they saw us, that they saw our foreparents as anything other than something that they could use and abuse as in a very inhumane kind of way, and so that is. That's still my thinking, which is again why I have a problem with those that consider them those jurists that consider themselves to be originalists. That they no, they did not think of us in the way in which they should think of us. They in which they must be thinking about us today in the 21st century. And in terms of the impact of COVID on African Americans, unfortunately, our community is we have so many underlining health challenges that it can constantly keeps us at the high level and constantly has us being disproportionately impacted by things that come across. We have pre-existing conditions, which is the reason why protecting the Affordable Care Act is so important, because it allows for the care of persons with pre-existing conditions. But I would say that because we are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, is more of a reason why we should be more involved in the conversations about and the debate about following the science, because the science is what's going to help us. The science is what has helped in some instances has helped us in terms of what the numbers could look like if we didn't do certain things that were recommended by the doctors, by the scientists. I am of the mind that you mentioned ethnic cleansing. I uh, I can't give the current occupier of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue the kind of intellect level to think along those lines. I can't do that. I think that that person is just someone who just lacks compassion and care and a sense of honor and duty and responsibility for his fellow country persons. And so ethnic cleansing, even though many of the decisions that are being made by the White House do not necessarily come from him, but coming from those that are around him, ethnic cleansing is something that I'm Dr. Shine. I'm just not willing to give them that kind of credit. I think that they are all they know is what they know, and that is how to be white supremacists, how to be racial dividers, how to be paranoid and schizophrenic in a lot of ways when it comes to how to be able to live in peace with their fellow men and women who do not look like them, do not talk like them, and do not have the same. May have the same values, but the values may be in conflict. We all support education, but I support public education, whereas others will support privatization of education. So the values are the same, but they're in conflict about how we approach them. But yes, That's a lot. We and everything that you have mentioned, everything that has come up, we as a people need to be involved in and understanding what's happening with the courts. We need to be involved in understanding what's happening with the pandemic, and we need to be involved in understanding what is happening in this administration and what is truth and what is fiction that's coming forward. We've got to be involved. We've got to know. We can't be sitting on the sideline and just spewing misinformation because that's what's being portrayed on television all the time is misinformation. We've got to be going to multiple sources, to reliable sources, and getting our information and then sharing correct information, whether it's something that we agree with or not. But we need to be sharing so that we are not a misinformed people, but or an ill-informed or miseducated, but we are an educated and informed people that is basing our rhetoric, that's basing our decision making on on because we have been informed, and so that makes us an informed people, and an informed people who we are taking all of these things that we've talked about. All of this is to inform people. As you use this platform to inform people, it's so that people can be informed when they not just talk about things, but also when they do things such as going to the polls and voting. We want informed persons to go to the polls and vote. We can't tell people as the director of the African American Religious Affairs at People for the American Way. I can't tell people who to vote for, but I can tell people to vote. I trust that people will have their conscience, will think about, will be other oriented in the way in which Jesus Christ was, and not thinking about just yourself, but thinking about others and the impact that this administration, whether it's at the federal level or the administrations at the state and local level, the impact that they will have on persons and their day-to-day livelihoods. And so that's what I want, is for people to be educated, not miseducated, to be informed, not misinformed, and so that they go to the polls with knowledge and make the right decisions about their participation in the Democratic, not the Democrats, but the Democratic, in a democratic society, which is what we have, meaning that we are a society, we are a government that votes, that elects our leaders. And so at no time should anybody be sitting on the sidelines saying that they don't know, that they don't have a reason to go vote, because everything that you and I have talked about in these few minutes should give somebody a reason why they should go and vote, and vote as if our community's lives depend upon it.
Exactly. If I can respond to a few points that you made, and before doing so, it's a good segue into, first of all, there was a Supreme Court jurist by the name of Tandy. And Tandy said, blacks have no rights that a white man is bound to respect. That's the originalist. And that's why I raised that question moments ago, because that was the attitude of the then jurists or Supreme Court. That was the attitude then. It was a highly racist Supreme Court in the 1800s. And secondly, because of that. Now, as I listen to you very carefully and intently, I'm coming away, and that's what I want to talk about. What's the takeaway here? Well, a platform such as this need to be more frequent um, in order that we can get the message out. I spoke to Duchess Arita. I spoke to her, and she said that the outreach is something like 89 million people. Now, and that may be scattered abroad and scattered around the entire globe. Uh, but the point being made that enough people who will be listening to such a broadcast of being informed, and constantly and frequently, they need to be informed, because as the radical right they constantly spew out their propaganda of protests, um, and use it in a negative sense, and wanting to um, refer to the protest movement not as peaceful, but as looters, shooters, and burners. Well, and that characterized Black people, and that's what their intent is on doing. I made you safe in the suburbs, things like that. Those are coded languages that's spewed out by the president. And these things then impact on people's lives. And so rather than to just dismiss them as one of the 3,000 lies he's told, they need to be addressed on social platforms such as this so that we can frequently give the truth as we know it from God, from our life's experience, from the both of them. And so another question that I want to raise, having made that comment, is that you as a leader in the African American community, and you identified your outreach extends to about 3,000 people, and these are all in some degree leaders. Some of the leaders in the core group are professional, and they from the classroom to the boardroom to many extent. So um, when we allow these issues to surface, um, what do you uh, envision being some of the positions that we take as an organization so that we can address down some of these hyper statements, propaganda, that we can address them down, and we provide the fact check so that we become the truth tellers, no matter what's in the opposition. So how would you take a look at where we go from here?
It it is absolutely necessary for us to, for first of all, for that persons assume responsibility to seek out the truth and to seek out truth tellers. Um, it is absolutely an imperative and necessary that we take platforms like this every day, every day, 7 days a week. There are at least 3 opportunities that I have to be on some sort of platform where information is being shared, um, where information that I would consider to be um, helpful and not harmful. It is my responsibility to connect with those outlets that are providing that kind of information. It is not the responsibility of others who um, of
Mm,
others on the other side to make sure that we are taking advantage of what's available to us. It's not their responsibility. They could care less. They're going to continue to use. They're going to buy ads on channels like BET and Aspire because they have the money to do so, to spread misinformation. But what we have are these vehicles now that are free to us, and we need to be exploiting them. There's absolutely no reason why people should know more about about how much Cayenne West is making and don't have any idea of again, who the current Supreme Court justice is, who was just confirmed. There's
right.
absolutely no reason for that to take place. There's no reason for people to not have a thought or a concern about the impact that the pandemic has on their personal lives, but also on our community as a whole. There's absolutely no reason for people to not be concerned about other communities that are having their rights being affected, being taken away, being torn down, and thinking that it will not have anything to do with us. Any hard fought right is a right that needs to be fought to be held. We can't be, especially in times like these, cannot be losing rights. We need to be upholding them and keeping them, even those that we don't agree with, because it just opens up a Pandora's box for who knows what else. But mostly it doesn't give us the kind of, it doesn't give us what we need to be able to be contributing and contributing members of society, when we don't say anything, when we don't take advantage of what's available to us, when we just don't do anything but sit around and complain. I do believe that um, when they talk about the Second Chance Act or the First Step Act as an example, and what it means to the African American community. It is a very powerful piece of legislation that was not birthed under the current administration, but two administrations back. The challenge that I have with it currently is that it's being promoted as and gives the impression that while statistics say that 1 in 5 Black men will face some sort of jail, will have uh, some sort of jail sentence or term, or some sort of law enforcement issue. That does not mean that every one of our Black men are are going to be a part of recipients of this act. That is specific to a certain community of individuals who have served their time and who rightfully we should not even have had to have an act. These individuals should have been persons who immediately upon completion of their sentences should have their voting rights reestablished and to have everything made available to them, so that they can again become contributing citizens of society, so that they can make contributions that are for the well-being of themselves, their family, and their community. And so the way in which we allow the other side to define us and who we are, and to legislate us in the way in which they do, is something that, if you have no other reason to going to vote, that's a reason to go right there, is because you don't want certain people who have certain kinds of ideas, stereotypes of prejudice and racist thoughts about who we are. You don't want those persons to be in positions to dictate through legislation who we are, so that they are. I think you used the word propaganda, so that they are out there um, uh, pursuing propaganda that is beneficial to a few and not to the many. So I think the takeaway from platforms such as this is that it allows for conversations to take place, whether they are with professional, or again, as I am a professional organizer, or if you had a lawyer here, if you had a teacher here, if you had a judge here, we know all of those kinds of persons who can be on this kind of a platform and can share their thoughts, their wisdom, their expertise, who would agree that when we educate, when we inform, and when we educate, we empower our people. And that is the main thing that I would want, that somebody would watch this and they would leave feeling a little bit more informed, or they feel that it sparked some curiosity to where they want to go a step further. Well, what does it mean to be an originalist? Where did that idea come from? And I need to have an understanding of it as I watch the next couple of weeks as Supreme Court decisions come down that's going to affect the Affordable Care Act, that's going to affect voting rights, that's going to affect reproductive issues, reproductive justice issues. I hope that this kind of platform inspires someone to go to the next step, so that they go and learn something and they share either this platform, or they create their own platform to share it with other people, so that we're not considered to be lost or stuck in this vacuum. There's so much that's available to us right now, that we just, again, I've taken on and taken and recaptured the word exploitation, for us to exploit the good, and to make sure that we are doing what is good in making sure that our community has the information that they need in order for it to become whole. The question that Jesus asked the man at the pool of Bethesda, I believe it was, Dr. Shine, and you know this was, do you want to be made whole? Does the community want to be made whole? And this is one of the ways in which we can become whole is by informing each other, is by having dialogues, by asking hard questions, by saying, I don't know if I don't know, or by going again and motivating somebody to go and find the answers. But we have touched on a lot of different issues in this call, but it all comes back down to our value system. What is that's the second takeaway. The first one is to exploit platforms such as this and the opportunities that it creates to inform. But the second is to look at our values and how our values help to dictate the decisions that we are making on a day-to-day basis, dictating what we listen to, dictating what we keep close to our heart and what we throw away. That's dictating us as we move along the way.
Well, I'm so glad to be a part of this dialogue, this particular exchange, because I think it was needful, and I am greatly appreciative of you. I'm appreciative of Duchess Robinson for developing this for this particular use. Now, you mentioned good. Are you about yes or no? I'm like Kamala when she's asking questions. Are you for good trouble? Way. By the way, Lewis was a Christian, and he held the values that you are espousing now. And as a consequence, he stood fast, stood firm, and stood forward. So that leads me to my final question, and that is the church's involvement. All of those who you represent and are represented well on this in this particular platform, there is a decided role. Urban League, NAACP, the National Baptist Conventions, not just the National Baptist itself, but the National Baptist Conventions as a whole, PNBC, NBC, um, with all of these groups, one of the things that I have discovered as a former officer in the PNBC, I was just a parliamentarian, but that's all. But at, at any rate, what I have found out in interacting, Philadelphia is an NBC city. And what I have found out is that nothing will get done unless God raise up men and women of faith, and already begun 11 years ago. And more has been done to contribute to the advancement of African Americans in the past 11 years. There is no equal. Leading this organization is a tremendous and terrific task. Leading our people who are themselves leaders in their respective cities. I don't know, I don't think I could name every city where we have representation who are effective and efficient. Would you comment on that?
Well, the church, the church being involved in social justice um, is not just, it's a mandate. It's not just that there actually should not be considered as the church having a choice whether to be involved in social justice. The church is still the institution, one of the few institutions that we still call ours. That is my church. That is my pastor. That is mine right there. And they're in our community. They are active and involved. One of the things that I love about the men and women that I get to work with in this ministerial alliance is that they move beyond the pulpit. They are foot soldiers. They know what it means to be servant leaders, what it means to serve. They get that we should be talking about the courts. They get that we should be talking about money out of politics. They get that we should be moving and speaking with moral authority in various arenas where there may be some confusion about what's being done. There are many organizations, civil and human rights organizations, civic rights and organizations, and other faith-based organizations such as mine that are doing a tremendous kind of work that's out there. One of the things that I love, there was a time back when Amnesty International used to have this theme, and it was one movement with many voices. And that's what I think of when I think about the civil rights community, when I think about the role of civil and civic organizations being involved and working in collaboration with the faith community, with churches, with worship centers, is that we have one goal in mind, but there are many ways in which we will approach it. There are many ways, many opportunities that we have to take advantage of to help us to get to where we want to be. So, so I am pleased to have comrades in arm, collars on the ground, as I like to call them, that believe in the work, believe that again they need to be speaking truth to power, in the power with the small p, in the power, the capital P of the Holy Spirit. I am glad to be able to be a part of groups such as those that and people who understand that we can't do this alone. That everything that we do, we must be partnering with people. We must have collaborations. We must have alliances. But we must do what we must do is what we must do, and that is to be a movement that is about human rights. And how do we get to human rights in this country is through various means, but it's all about, for us as those of us who are involved in the faith community, it is putting our faith in action. And it's kind of like my favorite scripture, Dr. Shine, is 2 Corinthians 4:7. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of power may be of God and not of us. The power is not of us, the power is of God. And the way in which how do we find that out? When we find that out by participating in activities that the church has extended itself to, where they connect the social gospel of Jesus Christ to the social justice movement.
Oh, thank you very much. I could go on and on. You specific points, and I thought another thought popped in my head: reparations, for an example, um, and other issues that we're confronting and being confronted with. Um, I don't want to exhaust your time um, because I can go on and continue, but we will do this again.
Yes,
Um,
we will.
it's a must because this message must be heard. And I think I left a footnote that sounds somewhat like this. I have only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Thrust upon me, I didn't choose it. I can't refuse it. Give account if I abuse it. Suffer loss if I lose it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. And so thank God for you and for what you stand for. Um, you have a nickname, Little General. So as the Little General leading the warfare of social justice, civic engagement, and public policy, that's smart. That's smart. And so um, that's an acronym, I believe, um, for how we approach um, social justice and civic engagement. Um, so whether it's strategic, whether it's timely, uh, whether it's realistic. I don't know how to I don't- Smart.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, realistic, or timely.
Thank you for the help. But that's good because we have smart goals and we know how to approach them being taught. I want to thank you. I don't know if our time is expired or there was a willingness for us to go on and on and on, but we will purpose to be back again. And hopefully you will come on, I believe. And there's some other subjects.
And do my homework, as you asked some very profound questions. People have to be on, when you come before Dr. Robert Shine Sr., you have to be prepared.
Well, no, I was provoked by responses to raise other answers to questions because the answers were timely, relevant, and they were strategic in terms of what we are about. And so it's greatly appreciated. The Lord has blessed you really. The church has a definite role in society as it always has had. And so I want to thank you, Reverend Wilson. Um, Perhaps on the next time that you join us, that you will ask Reverend Melvin Wilson if he would be so kind as to be a part of this interview. Um,
Absolutely.
I've heard him, and he is very deliberate in his thought processes on issues.
Absolutely.
And so I would greatly appreciate if you would extend an invitation on my behalf for him to come on and join us.